Hello and welcome back. This is Colin Keeley,
And I'm Brent Sanders.
and we are the co-founders of Avocado, an audio publishing platform. So I had the idea of going through kind of an end of the year questions and kind of looking back at the weird last year and looking forward and just going through the list. So to kick it off, this is the ideas section. So what's a space you're keeping an eye on?
You know, we can talk about audio, and we always do, but the other space that I'm really interested in is automation. I mean, we have a sort of a separate business in the sort of portfolio of the studio. I don't know, I'm making things up, right? So I'm saying there's a studio. We work with the same group of people on a lot of the different businesses, and another one in this space is called Formulated, and it's an RPA, really an automation company. And I've, over the last year, dug into this space like a tick, and I really think it's been getting a lot of traction in the last couple of years. You know, it's like one of those Gartner's predicting it to continue growing and continue to be a big part of IT spend. But in general, like in my day-to-day life, you see it more and more. And I guess it's one of those things where, like, that recency bias, where like once you see automation at work, you start seeing it everywhere. But I've been putting into practice on my daily sort of things that I do every day, and as I have been coding myself out of those jobs, it's made a huge difference. So automation in general, like, it doesn't have to be RPA, but like that is a great gateway to how do you implement AI and machine learning into sort of your work. And that's a great gateway to do that in my mind. And so I've been really interested in the space, part of another podcast in the space called the Formulated Automation Podcast. But that's been my big 2020, hobby interest that's quickly turning into a new job.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I'm kind of coming at it from a different direction. So automation was one of my answers as well. I've kind of been obsessed with this idea of humans being underlevered in America for quite a while. And I think that could take two different versions. Like, I think everyone should start processizing what they do. And so writing down everything that they're doing. And then you could either hire someone in the Philippines to do it for like a few dollars an hour. And the average American makes like, I don't know, $25 an hour or something like that. So I think that's a no brainer. Or you could do it with tech, which is more of what Formulated is focused on. And then, since you kind of took automation, I was going to say the creator economy generally. So we're kind of, proving we believe in these spaces with our time and decisions. But I think you're just going to see more and more businesses that are built like helping people monetize their knowledge. I think everyone kind of has knowledge inside them that they could start making money on. The pandemic has kind of shown that it's pretty risky just working for an employer for 20 years and, they could fire you at any time. So kind of going that independent route. And that is probably the easiest way to go the independent route.
Yeah. I had this conversation with some friends over this little holiday break, and one in particular around just like having control over your destiny to a certain extent. It's like you've worked somewhere. One of my close friends, awesome dude, has worked at a company since college, right out of college. And so we're like 12 years, 13 years out of that now, or at least for me. And he's still there, and he's got a great reputation there. But you could fathom a world, especially with the pandemic. Thankfully, he has not been affected, but there's always this fear of like, well, you could just, they could just decide this isn't the direction they're going. And, it's always a scary thing. So having some control over and talking about, creator economy, we always talk about in the sense of like, podcasts, audio, courses, something that you're teaching someone else. But there's also this whole Etsy world, right? This whole world of like, you can start to make. A friend of mine makes really cool adaptation for 2020 was like luxury necklaces that are actually clip-on mask holders. So it's like, anything that you can be doing to gaining additional streams of income, I think is awesome. And whether it takes over as a full-time thing or not, the ability that people now have due to the internet to be able to monetize that is killer. That's like, makes me so happy.
Then what's the opposite? What's a popular trend that you're not a believer in?
I would say in part some of the junk that's out there, and the same thing, this creator economy. I would say, I'm not trying to be controversial or anything right now, but I think my experience with avocado in 2020, we saw some creators that are using the creator economy to, I don't know, further their platform of nothingness. It's just like trying to get people, it's a platform of buzzwords. And, I'm not trying to name any names. I'm really struggling to give examples here to not name names, but I think there's a lot of people that are regurgitating, people like Tony Robbins, that are regurgitating a lot of the same messaging, but without the meat. There's like what you would see in a commercial, and you really never get, you take their courses or are tempted to take their courses, and there's nothing there. It's a whole lot of like, how I made my first $5-10 million, or how do I build $100,000 a month business. And it's always just, and I shouldn't say it's always, the ones that the cases where I think this is like an anti-trend, it's just noise. It's getting up and getting 12 hours of sleep isn't going to, there's not enough meat to that. There's note taking in a certain way, or drinking or eating a certain way, and intermittent fasting. There's just sort of this caricature right now of the creator that I wish would go away. That's like the antithesis of what we were just talking about, which is just like a little bit of more so snake oil, or sort of the carpetbagger of the era, where it's promising or demonstrating that they have these amazing gains, but the way that they get the gains is to get idiots to buy their course, and then they really get nothing out of it. So the hot take here, I think, was our revelation around Tai Lopez, who I thought was that kind of person. So I'm not making a really clear statement here, but looking at Tai Lopez, somebody who's creating, or on the surface made it seem like it was sort of a bullshit course. In listening to him have a conversation, it sounds like his course was actually super successful. It was a money back guarantee, and people really did find value out of it. And so, it's this really like Wild West space. And I think in part of it, that's one of the worst trends that I've seen in 2020. It's people trying to take advantage of this sort of like benevolent, I shouldn't say entirely benevolent, because people are charging for it, right? There's a value being exchanged for a course or some piece of content, but it seems like it's really easy to get sort of hoodwinked by some creators out there. So that's one of the trends that I wish would go away. But I don't think you can bifurcate it from the sort of good content. And I guess I'm being completely subjective in what I'm calling the good content, but that's my one. I guess if I had to distill it down, there was a series, and I haven't seen this come through my feed in a while, but there's a series of like TikTok creators that were like dancing their way to, with these little captions of like how to make a $1 million business. And it was just like, save, and like, don't go out to eat. And it was like, what are you talking about? It was so confusing. So that's in a sense an indication of the trend that I'd love to see go away.
Yeah, I think it has to. Like, there is just so much more quality online courses going on nowadays. So that's what people always associated with online courses historically, but I feel like it's changing. That's a good one. So my popular trend that I'm not a believer in is cycling as a workout. Peloton is obviously blown up during COVID. It's like an easy at-home workout. I just think it's so unnatural to spin your legs in a little circle. And that's like the bulk of your exercise. I have a Peloton. I love the competition of it and like competing, but I'm a big believer in Peloton as a company. I think the boot camps on the treadmill is really good. I think the yoga classes are great. I just don't think, so many people like this is the form of at-home exercise that they should be doing.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I'm literally going to PT on a weekly basis now because of my Peloton and my, I guess, poor form, but just spending way too much time on it. 45, I got really into it when, the pandemic kicked in, and I guess I was just doing it wrong or had bad form. Who knows, but I couldn't agree more that it should not be the only form of exercise. My hips just hurt thinking about the Peloton. But yeah, that's something that I think people were lucky enough to get before or have. But I just wish that it was as easy as getting a great weight setup. Like that seems to be the ultimate home gym pandemic setup. The true sign of success for 2020 was having like a really good, like a squat rack in your house. Ooh.
Yeah, these are all like my favorite purchases that we'll get into later. But I like weightlifting, you need a trainer, and most people haven't had the luxury of like being taught how to weightlift properly. So cycling, I think, is just significantly more approachable to everyone, even if it's not ideal.
Yeah.
But it'd be awesome if more people got trained in weightlifting. I think that's way better, or HIT or some
Yeah.
variation of that.
Yeah.
So how about your favorite new podcast?
So I don't know if this one was born in 2020. It might have been. It was new to me, and I know that it came out, I think, closer to like the end of 2019. But it's called Necronomipod, and it's silly and dumb and puts me to sleep. But I really enjoy it. So this is a show that's basically about either paranormal stories or horror stories, and there are three hosts. Kind of can't stand the part of it. It's just kind of like for lack of a better term, like dick and fart jokes and just like silliness. But then there's one person who's researched all these stories. So for example, like the Lizzie Borden story, or they go into like John Wayne Gacy, and they'll do these like in-depth analysis and research around the true story. Actually, I'll go back to one, was the John Benet Ramsey story, which is like the equivalent of, you'll see this on like daytime TV or like Lifetime channel, where they talk about, here was the case, but they do a really good job of research and analysis on the story, and actually give like a recount of here's what actually happened. And so that's been my guilty pleasure and new podcast for the year. That's really kept me sleeping on a better schedule. Like I listened to it before bed, and that's been pretty instrumental for my sleep. But I'm not listening to it because it puts me to sleep. It does it, but it really is like super enjoyable, and I've been digging that. So it's something completely outside of industry or work, or in furthering my skills, just purely enjoyment.
That's a good one. So mine is My First Million. So I'm kind of obsessed with these like tech bros that are always sharing and jamming on new ideas. So some ideas are bad for sure, but it's just fun to think of the analysis of the different businesses that they talk about, and variations or possibilities that come from it. So definitely squarely work focused, but I'm really enjoying
You hit me to that show, and I'm a fan. I listen to that on a pretty regular basis. They're really good. I was very skeptical. I think the first one you sent me was the Ty Lopez interview.
Mm-hmm.
And then they ended up having some other people on. They're talking about all these things that we're reading about on Twitter, right? And they give a face to it, and it's actually really solid. And I've enjoyed that a lot. Yeah. So thanks for hitting me to that one.
Yeah, the quick take analysis of businesses is generally really good. They definitely have some where I would love to be like, no, this is a bad business for this, and this. But it's just fun brainstorming. It used to be more of an interview podcast on like how someone made their first million, which is kind of boring. And then they just pivoted to brainstorms with just the two guys, or bringing other people on to brainstorm, and it's a lot more fun. So how about your favorite new newsletter?
Yeah, actually, I think it was one of the crew, one of the authors, or one of the hosts from My First Million. Is it Shane?
Yeah,
Puri?
Shane Puri.
Shane Puri. Yeah, I think it's his podcast. I would caveat all my newsletters. Sorry, his newsletter. I'd caveat all my newsletters with I don't really read them. I sign up for them, but anything that I have terrible email organization. And actually, listening to their show recently, they had the CEO of Superhuman on, and that inspired me. I'm going to maybe try that out, because my email inbox is just, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different inboxes, different companies, different, stages of my life or domains I haven't killed. So, and then within each of those, and they're all, I'm pretty sure every single one is a Google workspace. So it's a mess. I don't read my email because I'm just too busy digging out of it. But his is, so far, it's been really good. I've actually have read and gotten some good takeaways on that. I think he calls himself like the Framework Don, which I appreciate. That's pretty awesome. But yeah, that's been one of my favorites. I think early on I subscribed to, God, I can't remember it wasn't Superhuman. It was something similar to that, where they had a series of newsletters, and I had to just stop because I would get like 4 or 5 a week, and I'm like, got to catch up on the weekend, which is pretty tough for me.
It seems, unsustainable. Like the number of Substacks out there. I'd love if it just went directly to my Instapaper and I could just, read it in the future.
Yeah.
But my favorite newsletter, new one, is Packy McCormick's Not Boring. So he bills himself as like Bill Simmons mixed with Ben Thompson. So it's like strategy of tech companies. and like pretty deep dives, like think 20 to 30 minutes of reading. And he does a great job. And then he turns them all into podcasts. So he just reads through it. So with like all these Substacks that I don't ever get to, I always get to his because it's just super easy to consume 20 to 30 minutes of audio instead. I really appreciate
How do I
that.
find that? That sounds interesting. That I think I would actually consume. What is the name of it again?
Notboring.email is his website for it. I don't know if I know this guy somehow. He's around my age. It seems like we have a ton of mutual friends, but I'm not sure how I stumbled across him initially.
That's interesting. How about you? What's your latest new? So for 2020, your new Twitter follow. You're pretty active on Twitter.
Yeah, I am super active on Twitter. That's something I really invested in this year, not just consuming, but like creating on it. And something I want to continue with is like one decent tweet a day. So I kind of got into this like SMB Twitter, I guess you'd call it, like all these people that are interested in acquiring small businesses. Initially, obviously I wrote that piece on Andrew Wilkinson that it has gotten a great response. And I get a lot of inbound people talking about that. But my favorite new Twitter follow is probably Sweaty Startup. This guy, I think his name's Nick Huber. So he buys self-storage facilities in like third tier small towns, and he basically automates them. And he seems to be doing very, very well with it. He makes all his financials pretty public. And wow. I'm kind of intrigued by this SMB asset class as more baby boomers are retiring. And there's just going to be so many small businesses that are going to market. So I kind of like this thought of, we have our like barbell approach. Basically, we have our risky startups that we're working on, maybe blow up, maybe get really big or go to zero. And then like complementing that with kind of boring real estate or SMBs that you could kind of hire a manager to run and kind of operate independently, and will slowly compound over time.
Yeah, I dig the self-storage business. I mean, I think when I first realized how good it was we had done at a prior studio, we dug into the space. What was it from Marie Kondo's book? When that book started reaching its sort of like peak popularity, we were starting to look at like, okay, are people going to start, do they need help cleaning up and cleaning out their houses? And the conclusion from that, it was another team that ran the business for 8 months or so. And it was just, people don't want to get rid of their stuff. Even if they read the book and they think it's a great idea and they go through the process, they still have so much stuff. And it's so much easier to accumulate and get a storage unit and pay $200 a month on it. And for the self-storage companies, that market's there. That's a great business. So it's big fan of that approach. But in terms of my, I am less active on Twitter. I check it, I read it, and I'm more of like a lurker. That's kind of more of my profile. I would say the gentleman, what is his name? Jack Butcher. That's been a very interesting follow. At first it was, some interesting little illustrations. I feel like that, at least at the point when I was following him. And then it's turned into this, what I understand is like a framework for running a business or starting a business. So it sounds like somebody who is preaching this leverage mentality, which is awesome. Big believer in, building once, selling twice. That's a great piece of feedback. But the way he's doing it seems to be really unique and nuanced. And he's, teaching people and inspiring people to build businesses online. So I'm all for that. That's been probably one of my favorite, the person I'm screenshotting and sending links out to from. And as I go through my Twitter account, I'm a big bookmarker. And I would say I shouldn't say Jack Butcher. It's really the Visualize Value account. That's probably where I've sent the most screenshots from Twitter from. But yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
his Visualize Value is actually bigger than his Jack Butcher account.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he was sending, I have a whole bunch of just really, I don't know what the best word for it is. It articulates really well. I think it resonates with people. You send it out. I mean, beyond that, I love comedy Twitter, like non-work Twitter is, venture Twitter, and internet business Twitter is great, but like comedy Twitter is pretty killer. And so I have to give up, what is it? Caleb Huron. I might be saying his name wrong, but Caleb Says Things, I think is the account, and he is hilarious and just does a lot of like, I wouldn't call them monologues per se, but more like Vine style content where it's just him impersonating something, and it's been spot on. I think one of my most shared items is like him just being that friend who's super into astrology. So you have to check that out for yourself. But that I think is one of the underused aspects to Twitter has been comedy. That definitely keeps me coming back and checking out my feed is filling it up full of younger comedians. I mean, a lot of these people seem like they'd be doing either stand up or getting on shows, and they're out in LA. But using this platform is a good way to test out their bits, and I don't know, it keeps me cracking up. So that's definitely my favorite use for Twitter.
And then how about the best new software you're using?
Ooh, that's difficult because I'm like very, very set in my ways. As somebody who went through the Rome church, the sort of rise and fall of Rome, at least that first phase when I think there was an outage at some point, and then I was like, all right, I can't. I really got into Rome, and then got into Notion, and then have now kind of fallen back to my normal ways of a notebook and maybe a Trello board or 6. But really just loving IntelliJ. I don't know. I've spent a lot of my time writing code, and this is not a new piece of software, but they release a quarterly update, and I'm really happy with that. So I'm going to go with the safe and easy answer of my coding IDE, IntelliJ, the JetBrains, basically code IDE.
Okay.
How
So
about you?
yeah, I think we both tested out Rome around the same time, which was like very early at the start of the year. And
I feel
then
like
they were losing
April.
people's content, and we both kind of got spooked and never returned. But I took one weekend and really returned to it. Like I consumed all these courses and dived pretty deep in. Not that I'm an expert in any sense, but I moved everything over there. Probably for like the last 4 months, I've been doing almost all my work in like thinking in Rome, and then I copy it to email or Slack or Google Docs or whatever as needed. So that has been pretty life changing to me. I feel like I'm still just scratching the surface, but I've really enjoyed that. And then I use Readwise, which connects Instapaper and like Kindle highlights to Rome and kind of connects everything together as a second brain. So it's the runner up, I guess, but it's required to really use Rome how I currently use it.
So there's a methodology that's built into Rome. It's like you can use it however you want. The big thing is like these backlinks, or maybe that's not the right word, but basically like linking ideas and being able to expand. But there was also like a academic methodology that is inspired by it, right? Or that it was built and inspired by. Do you
Yeah,
use it in that context?
no, Zettelcasting is, I think,
Zettelcasting, yeah.
the term that they use. I tried. I don't like anything too formulaic. Like I think Rome
Mm,
works for me because it is free flowing, and you kind of just connect things as needed, which is more of how I think and operate. And then I set up like all those proper shortcuts and like nice structured everything, which is what Tiago Forte recommends, like
mm.
projects and areas and all this different stuff. I just don't do that. It's just so much extra work. Like I just want to be able to write and think and kind of rediscover my old ideas easier. And that is what it is useful for me.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I dug into it. I'd love to. I just have this weird feeling right now, like I'm, and I think it starts with email. I'm just feel really disorganized. I mean, I'm not dropping balls left and right and forgetting anything, but like, I just don't feel like I'm feeling very like I'm reacting to things versus being super proactive. And it feels weird. And it feels like it's rooted in emails. Like I have this just giant pile of emails that I know how to search through, but that feels so gross. And then from there, like the thinking and everything else is just kind of being notepad and like post-it notes on my monitor, which if you could see right now, there's like 6 of them, but it just doesn't feel very organized because once you finish those things, you kind of tear them up and throw them away. And it's hard to know, like, where are you going in this? So I need to dig back into Rome.
Yeah, I think the easiest way is just doing the daily notes and then tagging things like formulated or avocado, and then you could rediscover. And like
Mm,
what's been actually really useful for me is to-do lists. So you just do a like slash to do, and then you have all your to-dos that you could easily search. And then if you just hashtag them, whatever, you could see all your to-dos related to avocado or something like that.
right. Yeah.
So it's easier to not miss stuff that way. That's kind of how I got started. So how about what's the best project this year for you?
I would say avocado. I mean, I had such a blast working on it. I mean, we've been talking about the genesis and the progression of it, but the ability to, I don't know, I think it's checked all the boxes in terms of a builder perspective, like getting people onboarded, getting their feedback, like building to their needs, and using a tool set that's been pretty fun to work with. But I'd say distilling that down to sort of one thing, in working on Avocado, seeing, I think what is it, the Tailwind, like the open source UI project. So that's really my answer. I mean, in working on Avocado, I got to dig deep into Tailwind, and it's just changed the way I write like 30-40% less code because of it, because it has like a great way I can compose my own styles. And then they have a sub project built off of that if you use Tailwind and you also use Avocado, you'll notice it's called Tailwind UI, which is a project I feel like I sponsored. I paid some amount to get access to it early on, and I got a couple of components from it, but they keep adding to it and they keep releasing more stuff. And so it's a really interesting way to see how they're doing open source sort of plus. It's like open source, you can get Tailwind, the tool set, for free, but then you can buy this thing called Tailwind UI, which gives you some like pre-designed, pre-composed views, which we use for our navigation and like card displays and a bunch of really useful things that I don't know, we didn't have to hire a designer. I mean, maybe the UI kind of suffers a little bit, but I feel like everyone that uses it feels like it's polished. It feels like a finished product. It doesn't feel like we're hacking together stuff, which we in fact are. So I would say Tailwind is definitely the big winner for 2020 for me.
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know if I have like a best project. I think this path that we're going down is going to be really fruitful. I think we have interesting ideas. We have a good team together, and we haven't had any wild wins yet, but I just generally like the path that we've chosen of like spinning up these companies and pursuing them. I think that has a lot of potential, even if it hasn't paid off yet.
Yeah. Good.
How about biggest mistake this year?
Biggest mistake. That is a tough one. I mean, if we get into personal, I mean, honestly, there hasn't been much going on from a personal perspective, except for I did move. And I would say, this is less so of a, I know these are more business segment things, but I think the biggest mistake that has affected business has been, we've had a bit of a lapse in childcare. Like that's one that's affected my ability to like focus entirely on, I mean, obviously you have to balance everything, but just the uncertainty of a schedule and figuring out childcare after moving, we should have figured that, I think, out earlier. And that has had an impact on like, and I don't think you've noticed it on your end too much, but just like the uncertainty of your schedule can feel a little bit like isolating as it relates to work. And I'm sure people with kids in this last year have felt this a lot worse than I have. So I'm not really complaining. I think a little bit more planning ahead of the move. So I moved from Chicago, where we had great childcare. We had a nanny who was like in our bubble and super available to pick up days or flexible, to moving to Cleveland, where we had a nanny and then it didn't work out, and then have somebody who can only do 2 days a week. And a lot of it has fallen on my wife. So I really can't complain, but just that added stress of like each week looking at what your schedule is for work, what your goals are for work. And then this added layer of like, okay, chunk out this time, chunk out that time. That's been a real challenge. And I wish on the personal side, we had a recruiting company that would have, we didn't go with out of how expensive it was. And I wish we would have just bit the bullet then, found somebody who is going to be like as stable as we had in Chicago, because it really does have a downstream impact on how much anybody can then do. Both my wife and I can be productive wise at work, which is super challenging.
Yeah. I'd say mine is kind of, as the pandemic started, I felt like I was maybe too tunnel visioned on like audio, and questioning whether that like overly siloed approach was the right one, as the pandemic was opening up all these new opportunities, and we kind of had the skill set to take advantage of it. So
right.
I wonder if that was, a bit of a miss on our end. Call it, we're like halfway through the pandemic, and maybe we should have, pivoted what we had to something that would take advantage of the headwinds a little bit more. No,
this was going to be my other response. And so, because I kind of figure we're both in the same boat. We've talked about this, but like, and I've spent some time the last week to think about this, and I don't think there's too much of a too much more we could have done other than just looking at sales, like at the actual numbers of, hey, here's the sales. And we kept kind of going back to maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And so I agree with you that this is definitely something we could have done differently. That being said, there's a downside to looking at the sales too sort of myopically, right?
Yeah, I don't know. It just feels like there was potentially opportunities that we or I ignored in pursuit of this path that was chosen pre-pandemic.
Right.
And
True.
that my other one was every time Bitcoin goes down, I have this hunch like, oh, it's never going to go below like 10,000 again, and I should buy more. And I've kind of chosen not to do that, and obviously Bitcoin just like rocketed up over the weekend. So every time I've not bought more Bitcoin was kind of a mistake on my end. So I feel
It is now $31,273.40 to one
yeah.
Bitcoin.
Do you own Bitcoin or any significant
I
amount?
do. I did. So I bought some, like a small amount, right when it was struggling with 8,000, and I sold it for a small profit. And to be honest, like I just wanted to have cash around. We were buying a home. I didn't want to have any, and it wasn't enough to really make a difference in buying a home. But like, as somebody who's self-employed, going through an underwriting process for mortgages, didn't want to have anything funny going on. So
Mm-hmm.
then I rebought some right around, what was it at? This was like over a month ago. Yeah, it was right around 17, 18,000. So I just put a little bit back in, and that's done really well. It's just, not like a massively meaningful amount. I struggle with it a little bit because it does seem very fickle, and it does seem like there will be, the fluctuations have been there, although it does seem like a new era for it in this market. But everything seems weird with the market. It's like a melt up, and this idea that Bitcoin is sort of a new gold to put your money in, that makes sense, and I get the argument. But I also see a lot of people that, and this is where I see it the worst, is Twitter is like just, and generally everything around Bitcoin that you read is trash. There's just a lot of weird signals. Like I feel like people are trying to pump their own portfolios, and it just seems, I don't know. I can't get my arms around it, but I do believe it's going to continue to rise. And so I've put some money in there and was lucky enough to do it before this popped up.
Yeah, I think currency is just like a classic network effect business where more and more people believe it has value. And I think that's clearly what we're seeing. Like there's only so much Bitcoin, big institutions are trying to move money in, and the only way the price could go from there is up, just if there's more demand. It's definitely like a pump and hold, not like a pump and dump as much that's going
Yeah.
on Twitter and everything. But I'm a big believer, and I had like, I started buying pretty early around 500, and then I sold when it shot up to like 16, and then I started buying more. And so I was probably like recklessly too involved as far as like a percent of my net worth, but that's, proven to be, reasonably good decision at the moment. So it's a bit of a
Yeah.
question, like, do I let it ride or start selling stuff off? But
Let it ride, and then set up some self-storage units.
yeah, there you go. So besides Bitcoin, what's been a pleasant surprise of quarantine for you? We're in the life section now.
Yeah, obviously I was just complaining about childcare, but my son has been probably the most pleasant part of quarantine. Is, it is hard to step away from work when things are busy, but he's been a blast. He's now he's 16 months old. He's like talking, lightly, but his first steps and progression, it's just like a really, really fun time. I mean, it comes at the expense of no sleep, which I would say I really wasn't, when we decided to have kids, I wasn't really, I don't know. I wasn't the one who was like, I really need to have kids. And I wasn't really convinced that it was going to be a great idea, but it's been really, really fun. And he just continues to make me laugh, and we have fun. And I would say it comes at such a massive price on these other things that I used to hold dear, including my sleep, probably my health, but also just like control over, I'm one of those people that has to have kind of control over the work and life are very similar. So it's been a tough challenge, but it's been worth it. So I'm happy to report that's been a happy surprise.
And then for me, it's like So we both lived in Chicago. It became a temporarily walkable city during quarantine, which is
Oh
pretty
yeah.
cool. So Chicago shut down some streets. They called them shared streets to cars and then gave them to humans to walk, bike, and eat outside in some cases. And I just thought like that is exactly how cities should be. They should be built for people, not cars. I'd love for that to be permanent. I mean, I think Chicago's done in COVID kind of a horrible job. Like they shut down the lakefront. There's
Yeah.
no science
God.
to like back that up of shutting down parks and everything outdoors. That was super disappointing. And we really haven't, or at least in the summer, didn't do enough for restaurants. Like you could have easily shut down more streets and let people eat outside. And that's what science would
Yeah.
say is the appropriate route. But I don't know. It was cool to see it do Chicago as a whole do like for a couple months a good job of letting people enjoy the city.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, man, that was, I mean, we obviously moved and it wasn't because we're, some reaction to the city. It was just literally how do we get closer to family and things like that. My wife's family's all in Cleveland, but it was weird to see. I mean, we obviously were going to the parks. They had signs on them and said, don't come in here. But, you've got a little toddler at home who wants to swing or whatever. And everyone else is kind of just going, you keep your distance, still wore masks at the park, but it was weird. All these things were closed, but everyone was clearly using and no one was enforcing this stuff. And maybe that was reckless. And, obviously we didn't know a lot of the information about it, but it just felt like a weird reaction. But I honestly, the way I feel about everything related to COVID, you can't really point fingers. It was very hard to understand. You talk to one person, you get a very different perspective from another person, and they're both qualified. It's like very hard to, I think we'll look back on this time as just a lot of confusion and a lot of the rage about why did he close this but not that will subside over time. But I'm sure it's super painful right now for a lot of people that their core business like a restaurant owner is affected by it.
Mm-hmm. And then how about your biggest bummer of quarantine or COVID?
Yeah, I could say it's the same thing. It's like with the main reason we moved was just our son is at a developmental stage where he needs to be around kids. He's very socially, just kind of came out like that. He loves being around other kids. And that was a bummer to, and again, he's not school age. We didn't really like suffering like so many other people were. But just, that was hard to see. And, I mean, obviously, that was a big main reason why we moved, is just so we can kind of form a bubble with kids around his age and he can be social. And now that's reality. It's like he's able to see his cousin on a regular basis, and it's not like a illicit thing anymore where it's like, hey, we're kind of traveling to Cleveland to see somebody, where before that's kind of how it was, and we'd have to quarantine, and now we kind of have this bubble. But yeah, that was a little hard. And again, other people had it much worse. So thinking about and hearing the stories of kids that were potty trained that regressed, or kids that were getting to a certain reading level but have regressed. And so that's probably been the hardest thing to kind of grapple with.
So I love that yours are all heartfelt about your son, and mine are like the most selfish things possible. But so continuing in that vein, my biggest bummer of quarantine has been basketball. So I went from playing like 2 to 3 times a week to not touching a ball in like a year. So that was like kind of my third place, right? You have the office, you have home, and then I always went to like the gym, and it was like a social thing. And like, that's where I got out and kind of ran around, but lost that. So hopefully, 2021, be able to do that again. But
yeah, and like you don't replace, like, basketball is such a great workout. You got to replace it with, like, I don't even know what you could do at home to even just physically only, not to say there's all these other aspects to it, but just like cardio plus, I don't even know what like plyometrics. I mean, all the jumping around and stuff. It's like, there's no replacing that. And there's nothing you'd want to do that's as fun as playing for what, I mean, you probably play for an hour or so. If there's nothing you're going to do just to do a 10,000 jumping jacks and whatever else, I don't know how you replace it.
oh, it's horrible. Yeah, my college teammate used to always call it running with fun. Like that is what basketball is. As an adult, it's not really it's frowned upon to just frolic in the park or something.
Yeah it's too bad.
So how about your best habit picked up during COVID?
So it was the Peloton. It was working out every day, 45 minutes. Like, I got really into the power zone training. Unfortunately, I had this like weird reaction to in my hip, and so I had to stop. But I really got into a pretty good eating and working out schedule. Really good schedule, like every single day doing something. It ended up being the Peloton out of laziness because, trying to, the gym's opened a little bit, and I did it. I think it went 4 or 5 times, and it felt safe at first, and then it didn't feel as safe, so I stopped going there. But I did get into a pretty good like health system where I was working out pretty regularly, and that felt great, and it showed up in everything else. Like, was way more productive, was eating better, and my weight got into a pretty manageable thing. And I'm just going to lump it in with sort of the other side of the we'll do them together. The best habit, the worst habit. The worst habit that picked up after that was I was burning so many calories, I was justifying drinking more. And I was like, all right, I'll start, having a beer, which always leads to another beer, and then probably another beer, and then bad sleep, and then just kind of this weird cycle of, drinking coffee to recover in the morning, maybe eating something crappy in the morning, and then working out was the point in which the day I kind of felt better again and would start to do better. But those are, I think a lot of people ran into the same thing where you end up working out more, but you end up kind of like self-destructing a little bit more too.
Oh yeah. I think alcohol home sales are up like 40% or something. Very, very high. That was my worst habit as well, is like, I'm not a big drinker, but I kind of like that, like 5 p.m. or whatever, end of the workday, single beer or wine habit. And I think it's really easy to fall into these maybe bad habits and hard to break out of them. So I've since broken out of it. I don't, have an urge for that every day, but that was my worst habit. My best habit by far was, it was around like the end of January 2020, where I decided like I'm going to move from consumption to creation on Twitter and just kind of consistently tweet every morning around 9 a.m. And that has been very, very fruitful, like especially as the world kind of shut down. So I removed my location from Twitter and everything, and I'm just like a digital native. And it's pretty easy as long as you start creating. Like, very few people are creating on Twitter to connect with kind of everyone you aspire to, that you see on like tech or VC Twitter. So that is something I want to double down on as well in this coming year. I think everyone should do it. It takes time before your like tweets start getting noticed, but once you hit a certain number of followers, it becomes pretty fun.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed you met up with Andrew Wilkinson. You were able to catch up with him over the course of the year, which I think, when did you write that article? You sort of wrote an article, and we were both familiar with him. He seems like a really interesting character, but you wrote an article that was sort of an analysis of his approach to investing. Is that right? Or operating too as well?
Yeah, I call it an operating manual. So I listen to a lot of podcasts and I take quite a bit of notes in Rome and other things. And it was more like just, I thought his holding company approach is like adjacent to our startup studio approach. I think it's really compelling. And so I just basically open source my notes. And he happened to be coming to town in Chicago, and we grabbed food. It was really good to catch up with him. He's a good dude. I love his approach. He's kind of trying to be the like a Warren Buffett of internet companies, like the nice guy in private equity. So yeah, he's a good dude. I really aspire to do some of the stuff that he's doing. And the article has got a lot of inbound for me of like people interested in it and in the studio approach. So that's been fun.
That's killer. That's killer. I think we should probably pause there. I feel like we covered a lot.
Any of these other last ones you want to cover? These are like maybe rapid fire and less important though.
Yeah, let's see. You go for it. You got some?
Well, I'd say New Year's resolution is kind of an interesting one, or wildest predictions for 2021. Like
yeah, those are good. Let's hear yours. You go first.
So on the workout front, like, I'm pretty good about working out, but I used to plan more. So I'd love to just plan every Sunday. Like, these are my workouts for the week. And I'm going to, weightlift 3 days, yoga 2 days, and like, I don't know, Peloton or something else one day, and just stick to that week by week. So planning workouts more, and then tweeting. I just want to get back to the 1 a day thing, and creating more content in the world is kind of my thought there.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's similar to mine. I mean, I my main thing is just cut way back, and I don't think I will entirely stop drinking, but I'm going to cut way back. And I did this for a while during 2020, and I felt better, and I'm just going back to it. It's just no drinking during the week, or really on the weekends, even if, I'm not going to, there are situations that I find myself in, like celebrating something or going to a wedding, maybe I'll drink then. I don't know. I'm just trying to cut that way back. That's something that it just doesn't have a net positive anymore. I don't know that it ever did. It's just I felt like I could recover a lot easier. It wasn't a big deal to drink a bunch and wake up in the morning. It just didn't affect me. But I'm getting old, and it does. And so I'm just not. Speaking of which, my wife hasn't drank for like I think 5 years now. She's been sober, and not for any other reason than she just like just doesn't feel so good the next day, and got to remember that. So that's the thing I'm going to keep on in the front of my mind is just it feels terrible the next day, so it's not worth it. As far as
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask what are your wildest predictions for 2021?
Wildest prediction. Let's see.
And on a fun note.
Yeah. Bitcoin hitting what 100,000. That's actually not that wild as of right now. I thought it was like a week ago, but I feel like that is going to be one of these crazy stories where we see, the value. They have a smaller unit of measurement. Isn't it Satoshi? It's like 0.0001 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And we're going to see that start to be used. I think we're going to eventually see that number increase, but I'm not even like trying to pump Bitcoin. I think that is going to be something we're going to see cryptocurrency become adopted by average people and in institutions. They're going to normalize it. And there probably is going to be some sort of Fed involvement that comes through there. And the other wild prediction, or more so hope, I think we're going to see some either a massive change in social media. I really think that after the election and based on the zaniness of the news and the people that are broadcasting so much false rhetoric out there through Facebook, through Twitter, I think we're going to see some major changes there. At least I hope. I'm not advocating for one way or another. I just think something needs to change. And that's what I'd really like to see is some shifts in how like the law regards what you post online. I do feel like there needs to be some form of accountability around like the crazy stuff that I read people post. And a lot of them are family members that are like, oh, Aunt so-and-so believes this about QAnon. It's like, oh my God. Like, it just feels like it shouldn't be legal. Like there was in the FCC, if you were on the radio saying this stuff, you would probably get in trouble. I don't know. But I feel like there's going to be either a consolidation there or a major shift. That's my wild prediction for 2021.
I think that's a good one. I actually wrote Bitcoin 100K. It's funny you said that.
That's awesome.
I do think it seems more and more likely. Like it's just going to rocket upwards. Like the total market size of it is not that big yet. And it seems like that is where things are trending. My other big one is just like, I think in the next few months, everyone that wants a vaccine is going to get a vaccine. And then the summer is going to just be a huge party. Like whether people all have vaccines or not, it's going to be nice outside. A lot of people have vaccines. So I already have a bunch of friends that seem to be planning weddings in the summer. So I think it's going to be like the roaring 20s, a lot of pent up energy.
I can't wait. I'm excited. I have a lot of friends from my background, musicians, people that I've been catching up with that are just struggling. And I think it'll be great to see them get back to work, and like the whole cultural aspect of what the United States is really powerful. And even just movie studios, like, and I don't think when I think culture, I don't think of movies, but just all the things that go along with like, what our real value to the world is and our main export, which I think is culture. It's like seeing that return to normal, I think will be great. And all the things that go along with it, whether it's, going to bars and stuff like that, or restaurants, or stupid stuff that, maybe doesn't seem like it has value, actually does have a lot of importance. It'll be great to see it return.
It'll be nice. It's like weird watching all these movies where it's like weddings and, nice cozy bars. And there's just so much nostalgia for that. They look like period pieces now, right? It's just that world doesn't exist. So it'll be good to get back. But I guess let's cut it off. We don't want to go too long. Well, thanks for everyone that's listened. I think this has been fun. Be a good year.
Thanks so much.
All right. Bye-bye.